Good morning and welcome back to Let It Be Known. It is a special Let It Be Known. It is the summertime, so hot. And so we also are doing some things over the summer. So we'll be in and out, in and out. We will be here not tomorrow, but next week. But we will be around as the summer months play out and uh, the heat, the heat wave. If you're anywhere in the Northeast, you are suffering. You are definitely suffering. It is a lot of. It's not just hot. It's humid. It is it's sweaty. It's not too many things that I like to do that causes me to sweat. It's only a few things. Oh man, but it's good to be back on the air. Um, Even if it takes the conversation, we're scheduled to have a conversation this morning about global reparations. Um, so we got a guest scheduled to join us this morning to talk about her role in securing global reparations. A lot of us are skeptical about reparations happening stateside for sure. I mean, even the Evanston, Illinois situation, they're trying to challenge. So we will see. RNG says your heat wave is considered normal in the South. Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. See, I'm just I'm just never satisfied anyway. RNG. It's just but if it's too hot, it's too cold. I like the fall. Where's the fall? Where's the fall weather? We don't have fall. We have two seasons now, right? Winters this past winter was different. It was kind of cold, but winters have been really mild. And summers has been summers. This summer is kicking off with a bang. If you, like I said, the Northeast corridor from Boston to Virginia, Northern Virginia, anyway, you're looking at highs can get as much as 104. So I was out a little bit yesterday, uh, working, doing some reporting, and man, it got hot early, and like now, it's hot out there. But nonetheless, here we are, and lots happening, uh, lots to fill you in on in due time. In due time, but check this out. You probably saw this. I- comedians talk about what white folks do, what black folks do. Uh, then there's what crazy folks do. I mean, come on, y'all. Come on now. These two, the top of the Empire State Building, not just the building, but all the way to the what they call it, the spear, to the very tip top. These two people scaled the famous building, unfurled a pro peace banner, kissed a little bit, and displayed this sign that quotes, of all people, Jimi Hendrix, that says, "When the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace." That's Jimi Hendrix. Then they climb down some. He gets down on his knees and he proposes to her. They got to the spire of this is what you. I I get people are doing different things, different forms of protest. You look at Trump's the president's 250 so fair or whatever, and nobody's there, and you got Fox News even though they showing it on their cameras lying through their teeth. Oh, all these people here. It's like 5 people there. And they got performers, but these people protesting, and here they are. This is the folks right here. These are the folks. These are the folks. They, they get their 15 minutes. Apparently they do something for Netflix. Angela Nicola and Ivan Burkus are their names. Orangey says that is definitely mayonnaise people stuff. Uh, and then they walking around up there, around the ledge, like they're on the ground. Like, no, I guess you can't have any fear doing that, but a little wind, a little misstep, they were totally unconcerned. Totally unconcerned. The things people do. And and again, we're gonna talk about reparations, global reparations in a bit. But the lengths people go through and go to and don't wanna even consider reparations. So, I mean, make it make sense. Make it make sense. Oh gosh. I saw that. I First I thought it was AI or something, because everything you got to question now. Everything you got to question. And I'm like, these people are really up there. Breaking news here, breaking news there. And what's interesting, you hear the commentators or the news, not commentators, but news anchors. You remember back, everything when you say back in the day, when we had, it's not to put down news anchors today, but it was more formal stuff, more, I don't want to say classier because that is a put down if I say that. But the newscasters, I'm listening to all the different channels as they cover. They got the helicopters up there, and they're showing these 2 idiots up there on top of the Empire State Building, and the way that they are they are presenting the news people, like they're really they're kind of hoping that something dramatic, like a fall happens. It's a dumb stunt that could get them killed, but you don't wanna see that, right? Do you really wanna see that? I think people are so, um, tuned out when it comes to reality. There's no natural affection whatsoever, and I'm listening to these and saying, "Wow, now we" the more I listen to mainstream news or mainstream media, the more I understand why, um, people just don't like us journalists anymore. They don't particularly care for us. They don't trust us, and it's a shame. I'm happy to say that you don't necessarily see that in black media, and hopefully it stays that way. I know how, money is an issue, is always an issue. They take away our advertising, our sponsorships and things of that nature, DE&I, but we can't go down that road. I look at Byron Allen's The Griot, and he's got my man over there, Jaron, who is a great reporter, a great White House correspondent, a great, just not just the White House correspondent, he does everything is just great, but the Griot, they don't necessarily focus on the news, they focus on entertainment, and it's probably where the money is, but, you want them to you want black news, or new you want news presented from a black perspective, put it that way. Orangey says, "Off topic, you have to see the video of a black woman in Florida who stood her ground, and she shot and killed a white man in a parking lot. I don't know if she was charged with anything." I think I think you have that posted, RNG, if I'm not mistaken, on your story. I think I saw something about that. The Atlanta Black Star. And see, the Black Star, yeah, talk about the grill, but the Atlanta Black Star, he says they have the video on their IG page. They do some great news work. The Atlanta Black Star is where it's at. Atlanta Voice, Washington Informer, that's where it's at. They're not succumbing to what we see today with when it comes to news and how news is presented and packaged. You know, everything is about clicks, and I know we gotta get the clicks. I know we gotta get, some ad dollars. I mean, ad dollars is just almost non-existent anyway, been that way now for a few years. Um And before we get I'm really excited to have, the conversation with Jasmine Mickens. She's done oh my gosh, looking her up, and, I mean, the stuff that she's done is incredible, and you talk about fearless, and you talk about somebody who is just, on top of everything when it comes to such an important issue, and the issue is important to us, yes, as African Americans, but it's a global issue, and Jasmine Mickens, everything I've seen about her and her work, it brings to the fore that this is a global issue, reparations. And we tend to get stuck in one spot like, "Oh, I'm Black American, I deserve reparations." And you do. But it's more than just that. It's a lot more. So we're gonna get to that, but, let me get to this story too before we get, to our special guest. Um, you know, it's difficult because I like this man, Danny Glover, was on the Today Show. Um, and he announced that he, has been living with Alzheimer's disease for multiple years now. He's 79 years old, and he and his family spoke with Lester Holt. I worked with Lester some years ago when I worked for MSNBC and NBC News, and, um, such a great guy to have that particular interview. So I was really glad to see that. Um but Danny Glover and his family gave a glimpse into what life is like now for the four-time Emmy winner and why he decided to publicly share his diagnosis now. He says, "I'm sure as it advances, things are going to be different and changing." He says, "However, with the strong family behind him, he feels he has the support to face the incurable brain disorder." He says, "They've got my back." Um, Danny is one of more than 7 million people in this country over the age of 65 living with Alzheimer's disease, which you know is a progressive, fatal, neural degenerative disease. It robs people of their memories. It's such a sad thing. I've watched folks go through it. My aunt is going through it right now. A extremely close friends of mine, they going through it. They've been taking care of their mom for a long time. It's just there's just not anything good about it. The good days are great, um, but man, it's tough to watch. And so the Alzheimer's Association is now working with Danny Glover and advises that simple actions like staying physically active, managing blood pressure and diabetes, getting quality sleep, and staying socially connected can be crucial in the fight against Alzheimer's. The organization has emphasized that early detection can make a difference because the cognitive decline can start up to 15 years before a dementia diagnosis. That's amazing. Um, and our community, folks, black communities, brown communities, we sort of don't have time for the doctor visits all the time. We got to make the time, folks. We got to make the time. It's so important. And I know we get all a little bent out of shape or whatever when it comes to actors. Our beloved Hollywood figures, famous black folks, but we can't just this can't be the only motivator, but it should be a motivator to some extent. The motivator has to be our own family, our own selves. We have to take that time. I know it's tough, especially in this economy. Folks are trying to get to work, trying not to miss work, trying to do a little extra overtime or whatever it might be. But we gotta get that, we gotta see our doctors. We have to see our primary care and know yourself. Know your own body. Because sometimes the doctors, especially we know going back to the history when it comes to, uh, the medical community and the Black and brown community. So know yourself, get familiar with something that might seem a little out of the ordinary, don't ignore it. Go get a second opinion if the doctor starts telling you take 2 aspirins. Remember back in the day, and I say back in the day with all this gray hair, but you remember, but, you wanna talk about mental health or not feeling well, just go outside and play. Go outside and play. You just need some what's that stuff in the black bottle they used to get, Mercurocone or whatever they call it. Go on out there and play. Here, take some of this. It's the same thing the doctors do. Take 2 aspirins and call me in the morning, and you can't even get through to them. So, all the best to Danny Glover and his family. His daughter said that she thinks that it's really important for Danny to have control of his own narrative, of his own life story. And, I think that's it. Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. Real quick, another matter that we found to be very interesting. Richard Pryor's daughter, as you see here, she did a podcast uh, and opened up about life as a kid with Richard. I actually used to know, lost touch, but used to know two of Richard's kids, his youngest kids. But nonetheless, Elizabeth Pryor, Richard's daughter, his third eldest child with Maxine Silverman, says that in her new book, and she talks about it on the podcast, something we said, she says her mom called her the N word. Now, her mom is white when she was just 12 years old. And she said that memory is seared into her mind. And she says it was one of the earliest traumatic experiences as a biracial woman. Elizabeth did an interview with People Magazine as well. And she said she knew her mother loved her, but she also says that her mother never discussed being black with her. Um, that her mother basically ignored her background. I don't see how you could do that, but she said that's what happened. And she said that one of her cousins once said to her, "Do you know that I was black?" It, it's it's really crazy stuff. And it's like when remember Madonna adopted all those black kids and then felt free to use the N word. You don't be fooled by folks who take in they would even these celebrities, Madonna. I don't know, and I have not heard that there's been a problem with Angelina Jolie because she got all those black kids too. But a lot of times, that is, that they're still playing a role. These actors and whatever, these entertainers are still entertaining. You wonder how much of it is genuine, but, Madonna was famous for going on social media and referring to her black child as the N word. And now, Elizabeth Pryor is saying that her mother, her stepmother, basically referred to her as the N word. See, this is another reason why we need reparations, y'all. Another reason. I can probably name like 5,000 reasons, right? Or more. But I can tell you who else. For generations, the fight for reparations has largely been fought in classrooms, churches, community meetings, courtrooms, and on the streets. Governments listened or not. Some apologized, most moved on. Now something else has been happening that few imagined they would see in their lifetime. After the United Nations declared the trafficking and racialized enslavement of Africans the gravest crime against humanity, African and Caribbean leaders have unveiled a framework intended to move reparations from a moral demand to an international agenda. Whether this ultimately reshapes the world or becomes another unrealized promise remains to be seen. But joining us is someone who hasn't simply studied the movement, she has helped build it. We're talking about Jasmine Mickens, uh, the globally recognized Pan-African strategist. Um, we can go on with the platitudes for her. She earned them. She deserves them. Her work has helped shape so much. Jasmine, welcome to Let It Be Known.
Thanks so much for elevating this important topic, Stacey. I'm honored to join you.
It is absolutely a pleasure to have you. For people who woke up this week and suddenly saw, or woke up recently, I should say, and suddenly saw headlines about a global reparations framework, what have they actually missed over the past decade?
Yeah, so why don't we start with the moment that we're in? Because the world has shifted on the topic of reparations over the past 5 years. And if we go back to 2020, where there was a global uprising around George Floyd, that was a turning point because now the topic of reparations has risen back to the surface. And it's coming at a time where you can't ignore what's going on around you. And the pandemic forced us to focus on this topic. I remember myself, I had actually learned that I was going to become a mom during this time. And I had to grapple with the excitement of becoming a mom and the fear of the world around me. Like the world just felt like it was literally burning down. You remember all of the chaos that we was dealing with. And so since that moment, we are now seeing unprecedented political will at the head of state level, civil society traction across 4 continents, and transnational coordination of Black people across over 70 countries. Okay, so in this moment, we are not just limited by what we can do in our individual countries, but by what we can do across countries. And we're asking ourselves, why build this alone when we can build this together?
Yeah. Wow. And Justin, who sat at this table to build this framework? Was it governments, economists, lawyers, historians, grassroots
Yes.
organizers? Who was inside that room?
Yeah, so you have a combination of senior officials in governments, governments that were represented by Brazil, Algeria, the Caribbean nations, for example, which is made up through CARICOM. You've also had experts who are lawyers. I mean, the best, the sharpest lawyers, economists, historians, academics, statisticians. So you have a strong variety of experts who are able to come to the table, bring different perspectives so that we can shape what is looking like a global agenda. It's not final, it's not comprehensive. Well, I think it is comprehensive, but it may not include everything that people want to see, but I think it includes the best convergence and alignment of what the diaspora wants to see, considering the regional variation in the topic and the different histories and historical realities.
And what would you say were give us an example if you can of what may have been some of
Yeah.
the hardest conversations in that?
Okay. So the hardest conversations. This is so interesting because let me take us back because there's so
Mhm.
much context that we have to understand in order to properly assess the moment that we're in. So remember, we talked about 2020, right? And then we get to this moment where there's this traction, there's this momentum. And what's happening with this momentum and this process is that we are rebuilding our sense of global peoplehood through this global reparations movement. Okay, this is an untapped power that is now being activated in a way that we've never seen before. This is the promise of the movement. And when we think about the history that got us here, we have to talk about the World Conference Against Racism and Xenophobia in 2001, right? That was one of the most important global moments in the reparations and in the Pan African movement. And
Mm.
in the Pan African world, that moment was seen as the opportunity because it had 3 things that had never aligned globally before. You had a UN forum with political legitimacy, a unified transnational Pan-African movement, and then you had this growing international acceptance that historical injustices have ongoing consequences that need to be resolved. So this was the closest that the reparations movement at the time. This is the closest they had gotten to developing a global diplomatic agenda. The moment that they thought we were in then is the
Yes.
moment we're in now. Okay,
Wow.
because if you read the Pan African Pantheon, chapter 2, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles talks about the Great Durban Betrayal, because unfortunately we didn't meet the moment at that time because we were not unified. We were divided, and divide and conquer one. And this is important because we had agreement going into Durban that we were going to collectively raise the issue of reparations as a crime against humanity. And it just didn't come into fruition. The West, the US, Canada, and Western Europe, they stood in solidarity together then as they pretty much did now. And Africa in its diaspora did not stand as one. So some got splintered with former enslavers and colonizers. And people say that the spirit of Pan Africanism died that day.
Mm.
And fast forward 25 years later to this moment, we have not only political courage and leadership, but we have an African country that's rebuilding the Pan African spirit and the unity that we need to get us to this moment. So, a lot of the division that we had then, we are working through now. And I think that is why this moment is so important when we think about unity and what it means to come together.
Do you think that folks still haven't fully grasped eh, the gravity of the transatlantic trade uh, slave trade? Do you think they still haven't grasped on a global scale?
Mhm.
Is it still not being viewed the way we know it should be?
I think the resolution gets us closer than we've ever been
Okay.
to clarifying the historical record of what our history is. And I'm going to tell you why I think that. The resolution, first of all, in the title, that it declares the trafficking and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans as the gravest crime against humanity. That framing makes clear that this was not a slave trade. So we never use the word slave trade when we
Okay.
talk about chattel enslavement. And we're also clear that chattel enslavement is a unique type of slavery. It's not normal. People like to conflate the racialized chattel enslavement of Africans as just another form of human bondage or serfdom that was normal during that time, and it wasn't. When we say racialized chattel enslavement, we're talking about people that are being reduced to the status of chattel. So the category of non human is created through us because of our race. And then we are then excluded completely from society, any ability to live our lives as people, and then made into these globally traded commodities. And Black women in particular become the middle passage of people who will inherit the status of slaves in perpetuity. So I think because of the framing of the resolution, it becomes an opportunity to clarify the historical record and it explains it as a world breaking event. And that's the language I think we need to be using when we talk about racialized chattel enslavement. It was a world breaking event that fundamentally remade the world for all of mankind, not just Black people. And it did two things: it put in motion the current world order that has, as we can see, reshaped the course of humanity from today's economic, political, legal, racial, and even the ecological systems. All of these systems are born through African captivity and chattel enslavement as a result continues to be foundational to the structural inequality of today. So I appreciate how the resolution clarifies this historical record and makes clear that this is not just a sad chapter in history for African people, but for the world. And this is why it has to be a collective effort. And this is why I also think the resolution was able to garner support of 123 countries.
Wow. And I mean that's amazing. 120 three countries. Um what nation, when you think about the 123 countries, what nation of those 123 may have challenged this the most,
Mm.
if you can think about that.
So the 123, these were our supporters. I didn't see a lot of resistance there.
Okay.
The strongest resistance came from the people we expected it. Obviously, the United States rejected everything that mentioned reparations or anything that was understood as DEI. I think the 52 extensions is something to be analyzed further because
Mm.
I'm gonna highlight three countries: Germany, the UK, and the Ukraine. These countries understand reparations very well. They just don't
Okay.
support it for Black people. So, Germany, for example, as of 2026, it is still paying reparations for the Holocaust, according to the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. And so this year, they are extending another $1 billion for aging Holocaust survivors home care. Okay. Then you have the British government in 1834, they paid $20 million in reparations to enslavers. And then you have the Ukraine, who is
Wait,
currently
hang
controlled
on, hang on. Say it again one more time. They paid it to who?
enslavers,
Right.
not
Not
the
not
enslaved people,
not the victims.
not the victims. Okay, but they understand the concept enough to have structured a loan to pay these enslavers that they just finished paying off in 2015. Okay, so that means every person living in the UK has paid towards reparations for enslavers, even Black people. So they have gotten paid more
Mm.
than once at this point
Wow. And
across generations. So when people say they don't know
mhm,
or they talk about how it's going to break the economy or they don't know how to do it economically, they know. There are
yeah,
models out there. We have seen it happen multiple times. And so it's just a question of will. And the last thing I wanted to point out was on the
for sure.
Ukraine because they are also pursuing reparations from Russia. So these are countries that understand it fundamentally and care about it, just not enough for Black people, in my opinion.
Right. Wow. And oftentimes, when we talk about reparations, we're looking at for dollar figures, a number or something, right? I think, and maybe you could speak to this, Jasmine. What is often lost in that, in fact, mostly lost, when we think about reparations and paying what they may owe us.
Mhm.
Have anyone ever looked at what they've reaped because of their crimes? I mean, the amount has to be. I mean, how do you calculate it?
Yeah.
It has to be some crazy amount. So when you put those two together, oh my gosh, what we lost and what they gained.
Right, right. Which brings in this kind of contradiction of African and Caribbean countries owing debt. How do you owe debt to people who owe you reparations? These are
Exactly.
countries that have systemically benefited from uh, this is deliberate underdevelopment of global African people. And you have developed yourself as a result. And so that's where, when you get into the international conversations, you have to start looking at the global financial architecture, economic systems, trade agreements. All of these things are infrastructures that were built on white supremacy and on colonialism that continue to extract and exploit our communities to this day. And so we have to start thinking about not just what was gained and what we are being told that we owe in debt, but also how are we reconciling the two and how are we developing new systems, because we have to have a new imagination of what the world can be and how we want to show up in that world that's beyond the confines of white supremacy, slavery, colonialism, genocide, and apartheid.
Yeah. And we've heard in some cases there have been an apology. In a lot of places, they refuse to apologize or formally apologize. What separates an apology from accountability, though?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, we need apologies that are legally binding. Right now, as long as these apologies are just rhetoric, you get to apologize without any personal or legal obligation to actually do something about it. And
Hmm.
from a symbolic standpoint, that's great for the person who's apologizing because they get to show that they have this moral compass that's guiding them to have this reflection and make this statement. But there's typically no action that follows it, and there's no legal obligation for an empty apology.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And here, especially in America, we hear folks say stuff like, "Well, I didn't own the slave. No one today owns slaves." Where does that conversation go
Yeah.
when you hear that?
For me, it's not about whether you own slaves. What we can say and what we can see and what we can prove is that the slavery and colonialism have living architecture that we still have to confront and we have to contest, because there are still benefits that people are reaping, companies, countries, from slavery. And just as, this is what I say, just as people have been able to inherit the wealth and benefit from the wealth, we have had to inherit the harms and the poverty. And so that means collectively, we all inherit the responsibility to do something about it. And that responsibility is reparations.
Yeah. Wow. Um, I'm going to talk again about Africa a little bit itself, the continent and the folks on the continent, the governments on the continent. What do they understand about this conversation that the United States often misses?
Hmm. Well, number one, that there has to be political courage and it has to come from Black leadership. We haven't had that kind of political courage, political will at the head of state level in the United States. We know that.
Mm,
And that's why what Ghana is doing is so important in this moment, because they're setting the standard for what it means, one, to be the African Union champion on reparations, but also how do you meet this moment as a government? And they understand that they have to take some bold moves. They have to move fast. And they also have to make sure that the work that they do is happening in direct and continuous consultation with communities. You can't have a political strategy or a government that's making moves on this without talking to people. This is a people driven and a people built movement. And Ghana understands that. And Ghana has been doing an incredible job at keeping itself accountable and in alignment with what people are saying. So when you talk about the outcomes document, for example, we know that there were governments who were engaged. I said the government of Brazil, CARICOM governments, Algeria, but there were also people from civil society, regular people, experts, senior officials. This outcomes document was developed through a series of virtual and in-person consultations with these various groups. That's key. Okay.
hmm
And then if you're using that process to gradually get us to unify our global agendas, then we're moving in the direction of becoming a more unified people. And I think that's critical, because two things can be true. We need this
hmm
global framework in order to have a global agenda so that we're all going in the same direction. But then there's also the need for us to understand, well, what are our national movements, and how do we overcome national fragmentation in order to build this national cohesion in a concerted effort. And so it's forcing two things to happen. It's forcing us to come together globally, but also for us to come together nationally. Because if we are divided at home, then we cannot succeed globally within the larger collective space.
Yeah. There have been some here in the United States, Evanston, Illinois, in
Yes.
Boston. Um, what when you see what happened there in those locations, especially Evanston, um,
Yeah.
is that sort of is that sufficient in any way
In terms of reparations,
in terms of reparations? Yeah.
I think it's a starting point. You always got to get your footing somewhere, and that is what Evanston was able to do in the national reparations conversation. If you think about some of the recent news that's happening around Evanston, which is that there's now a DOJ lawsuit being filed against them because same claims around reverse racism and DEI, this whole concept, this whole anti-black um, rhetoric that's growing and getting stronger in the US. I see that as that's the opposition already clapping back, trying to scare us,
Mm.
trying to exhaust us legally, because they understand that we are becoming more powerful and we are becoming more organized. And it shows us how white supremacy can always redefine the rules of engagement. And in this case, it's racists deciding that resistance to racism is racism. And as we try to make reparations the equalizer that remedies the harm that was done on the basis of race, this is the backlash that we have to expect, and we have to start preparing ourselves for.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talked about this. RNG mentions that since 1952, the German government has paid $95 billion in reparations to Jewish individuals and the state of Israel. And I'm also thinking, Jasmine, too, that another issue is that many descendants of enslaved Africans don't know exactly where their ancestors came from because those
Mm-hmm.
records were erased. How does a
Mm-hmm.
reparations framework address a history that was deliberately fragmented?
Yeah, so the outcome document does talk about repatriation, right to return, and the discussion that surrounded this topic is having opportunities for people to do their DNA with companies that are Black owned and that do not sell data and can actually give you more specificity as to where in Africa you come from. So I think that is an important part of the conversation because people are eager for that reconnection and that cultural bridge being rebuilt. I think the other aspect to this conversation around repatriation is how are African governments going to create policies that make it easy for people to return and resettle or have dual citizenship. So these conversations are underway, and I think again, this is why Ghana is a great leader on this because they've already been doing this since 2019 with the year of return, finding new ways to engage their diaspora and looking at what models of diaspora development exist and how do we come together as a global people to utilize our strengths, but also to build something that allows us all to thrive.
Yeah, the city of San Francisco did a study and they put together a group and they came up with various proposals and ideas. The state of California also itself, we know that they did a huge reparations task force, etc.
Mhm.
As far as on the federal level, I think it's HR 40 is the bill
Mhm.
that's been in in and out of the house for 40 years now. When you think about all of that, eh, why is it that you can go on a global scale, you can get all these countries, 132, I believe, which to agree that reparations is a necessity and should be mandated somehow. Why is it that we
Mhm.
can't in this country? It's
Mhm.
always a study. It's always a study, and I love what Westmore. At
Yeah.
first, there was pushback with Westmore not signing that bill, but Westmore said, "Haven't we had enough studies? I
Yep.
mean, why are we
Yep.
still studying? Is there still stuff to study, Jasmine?"
No, no. And this is where the global conversation is. Once you start bringing together all the academics who have studied this issue to death, and I mean, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles is one of the foremost scholars on reparations. He has really urged us to start thinking about, not thinking about, but doing this, moving from making the case for reparations to how we want reparations to be implemented and how we want it to be negotiated. That is where the global conversation is right now. We're not studying, we're not making the case. We are moving forward into a phase of action because we can't have conferences and conversations that don't move us to a goal. And I think in the US, there are groups who are trying to contend with the political will of our country. And for a long time, HR 40 has been, you know, where people wanted to go because that is what was palatable within our political environment. I think now seeing what other countries are doing, this might be one of the few times that US political leaders can look to other countries to say, hey, we actually need to be following your lead. And we actually want to see this movement beyond just where we are, but where we can be in global community, in global partnership, and within a global strategy. Because at this point, it's like The only way forward is together. We can't do this as one country or one group. We have to find and tap into our collective power. And that's what the global reparations movement is about.
Yeah, it seems as I ask this question, well, let me ask the question: if tomorrow another
Mhm,
nation publicly
mhm.
endorsed this framework, which country um, would send the strongest signal to the rest of the world? Now, America, of course, probably won't be that country, but is there another country outside of America, or is that the answer that it would be America that would send the strongest message or signal by endorsing the framework?
Yes, absolutely. I think if you had a US government, especially this one, that suddenly endorse this framework, it would have a geopolitical shockwave because it's sending a message of endorsement and of support, and that's kind of breaking up the political bloc of the West. That would force the others in that bloc to also contend with where they stand and why. So it's I would love for us to be able to get to a point where America is going to lead in that way, but we got a
Yeah.
lot more work to do.
Yeah, and you, of course, have been at the forefront of all of this with the international strategy. Did anyone involved, Jasmine, ever discuss what failure would look like?
Hmm, that's a great question. I would say not explicitly, but we have discussed fear. And I'm gonna give you an example. When the resolution was in its early drafting stage, one of the triggers was the use of the word Gravis because people were in this framework or this mindset of colonial autocorrect. Can we say that? Is that too strong? And I think when you are pushing the envelope, which this conversation is never popular or something that people feel is politically palatable, you're always figuring out what are your guardrails and what boundaries do you want to push. I think that is what is always going to be where we're contesting with how far we can go based off of one, not limiting ourselves, but also proceeding without fear and proceeding without a fear of failure, especially once you
Mhm.
start letting the possibility of failure creep in. I think you start to hesitate more. You might dilute what's possible and you limit your imagination. So I personally haven't thought about failure. I just think about what do we need to do to win and how do we create the conditions for that. That's the most
Yeah.
important thing, and that keeps us focused. That for me, that puts blinders on so that we are aware of the threats, we are aware of our weaknesses, but we are solidifying and building our strengths.
Yeah, and when descendants of enslavers and descendants of the enslaved finally do, and we're saying that in a more positive way, when they do, not if, but when they eventually sit at the same negotiating table, what conversation has to happen, Jasmine, before anyone ever talks about dollars?
Structures. You got to make sure we are putting new structures in place. So that means we have structures that are not only new, but that are owned by us. Right now, if you look at several African economies, some African countries don't really own their own currency, right? So hypothetically, you get reparations today. If reparations has to come through a currency you don't own and systems you don't own and banks you don't own, then you are just leaking out those reparations in the same systems that extracted and exploited them. So it's critical that we identify the structures and we focus on how these structures are going to allow sovereignty, self
Mhm.
determination, and prosperity for Africans and people of African descent.
Wow. And of course, history remembers the people who committed the atrocities, but it rarely remembers the people who designed justice afterwards, Jasmine. Are we finally writing that second chapter?
Every day, every day. And you know what's key about this conversation is that this movement has to be intergenerational, multi-generational in order for it to survive, in order for it to keep the spirit of our elders, our ancestors who started this work the day that this crime was committed, within the hour that it was committed. Black people have resisted and have litigated for reparations. So we can't let anybody tell us that there was no resistance and that the litigation just started or the movement just started. It did not. It will continue, and we must have an intergenerational focus in sustaining that.
You know what I didn't ask you, Jasmine, is how did you first get involved?
You know, I was a grad student. I had an amazing professor who gave us this course on the politics of truth commissions. And I started to understand the inner workings of truth commissions, but also their limitation. People love to talk about South Africa, which I think South Africa did a lot of amazing things, but South Africa never restructured its systems and they never fully repaired the harm done on Black people. And so reparations is the unfinished business of slavery, of colonialism, of apartheid, of genocide. And if we remember that, then we don't limit ourselves to the truth commissions or the studies or the ideas, but we commit ourselves to action and we commit ourselves to something that is going to systemically change the world and recreate the world as we know it.
25 years from now, Jasmine, when someone asks what Jasmine Mickens spent her career trying to accomplish, what do you hope the answer will be?
Look, y'all could call me the Harriet Tubman of the reparations movement
There you
because
go.
I'm trying to build this as a underground railroad that gets as many of us free as fast as possible, as many of us possible, and as much as possible.
Mm. Well, you've been at it. It seems like like I said, when I heard about you and read up a little bit about you, it seems like you've been doing this like 100 years. And that means you put so much into this. Um, what is it, Jasmine, that there seems to be this we talked a little bit about this. I think we probably covered it a little bit anyway, but the idea that it's just about money.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just underscore why this is not just about money?
Yeah, so we do want money. We don't. I hear people say
Hmm.
no, we don't want money. We do want money.
Oh yeah.
Money is a part of the reparations conversation. However, it's not the only part. And as I pointed out earlier, we need new structures. Okay, the way the world was designed, it was constructed through the imagination of white supremacy. So that means in order for us to reimagine and reinvent the future, we have to have new systems. We have to dream and imagine what those new systems are, and we have to design. We have to pilot them. We have to figure out what that looks like. And so we can't just limit ourselves to a paycheck, because as I pointed out, if you don't have the structures in place, you are putting that paycheck back into structures that you do not own and that do not contribute to the liberation or the betterment of Black people.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jasmine Mickens, folks, if you don't know, one of the principal architects of today's global reparations movement, and your work, Jasmine, has helped shape the Accra proclamation on reparations, the African Union's year and decade of reparations initiatives, and international coalition stretching from Africa, the Caribbean, Europe, the United States. Where the energy comes from, young lady. Where's all that energy come from?
Listen, it's the ancestors. They guide me, they cheer us on, they keep us going.
Yeah. Wow. Jasmine, you are such a guiding force, a bright light in this otherwise mostly dark world. We appreciate you so much. And come again, please.
I'd be honored. Thank you so much, JC.
Absolutely. Jasmine Mickens, everybody. We certainly appreciate. Thanks for joining. Let it be known. We certainly appreciate the insight someone like Jasmine can bring, and only someone like Jasmine can bring it. I mean, we've read her basically what she's done, what she is doing, because the work is not done. She obviously first to tell you the work is not done. It's far from done, but she's gotten a lot of the legwork, folks. So when we have that reparations conversation, it starts. It has to start with Jasmine Mickens. Folks, thanks again for tuning in. Stay cool out there. It is hydrated, folks. Hydration is the key. And us dark skinned folks, we got to stay out. We got to preserve what we have somehow. But appreciate you all joining Donnell Suggs of the Atlanta Voice, one of the best newspapers there is in the country. People say one of the best black newspapers. No, one of the best newspapers, period. Um, and that's what I say about several of the newspapers, like the Voice, like the Washington Informer, like the Philly Tribune, um, like the LA Sentinel. These are some of the best newspapers in the world. You can have your mainstream, but they're not doing the work that these black-owned publications continue to do with absolutely very little, if any, resources. Some of them you can say shoestring budget. Yeah, they may have the string and not the shoe. So, but they're getting it done, and a lot of that is thanks to you who continue to support black-owned media, and we thank you here at Let It Be Known. We will see you again. Thanks for joining.
Let's go! Let's go, Flame. Hey!